Well, yeah, I remember one night we were working on a fire, and it was one of these rare fires where we actually had a chainsaw, and it was about, you know, 12 o'clock at night, and we were in the process of felling trees. And along comes this line boss saying, "What are you doing?" I said, "We're cutting down trees." He said, "You can't cut down trees at night." And we said, "Well, we do it all the time." He said, "Who are you?" He said, "Well, we're the Reading Smoke Jumpers." He said, "Oh, damn it," just walked off. And I don't know whether it's changed very much since then, but you know, at the time, we all had a culture of non-uniformity. Everybody wore civilian clothes. So the moment you got out of your jumpsuit and on the ground, we all had different outfits that we had on. And all the other firefighters would show up with, you know, they came from a particular crew and they were all dressed the same way. And we looked like a bunch of people from from the back streets or something. And we really prided ourselves on the fact that we looked different, we acted different, and we operated by different rules. We didn't mind dropping trees at night because A, we knew how to do it, and B, in most cases, we knew exactly who was where. So once you got on a project fire, you know, we were always looking for a way out. And there were some days, I remember one day when I think I jumped 2 fires and some of the people in the crew jumped 3. We'd gone out, first day, that's where I started with the airplanes. You have a lightning fire, a dry lightning storm come through Northern California, and they'd wake us up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and by dawn we were in the air, and we were doing what we were called jumping smokes. And so these were fires which hadn't even been reported yet, and the spotter would make the decision whether or not that particular lightning strike posed a threat, and he had so many jumpers available, so he was looking around figuring out, where will I drop people? And so he would drop us on a fire, and we would start suppression efforts. And then it may well be that, you know, a ground crew would get there 2 or 3 hours later, and then we would helicopter out and make another jump later in the afternoon. And one person I remember, when you came back, you always went to the bottom of the jump list and worked your way back up to the top. And that day, one of the people who jumped early in the day ended up making a 3rd jump on the same day. But it was, you know, and the key for us was early suppression. You know, get there. You know, we didn't wait until a fire was reported to jump it, and it did have some downsides because there were a couple of times when we jumped on fires and you ended up sort of saying to yourself, "Well, where are we?" You know, if you jump a reported fire that's got a latitude and longitude associated with it, and the spotter marks that on the map and says, "Here's your fire," that's one thing. If he just hands you the map for the forest and says, "You're someplace on the 6 rivers," well, after the fire's out, then you have to say, "Okay, where are we?" And that led to some, you know, some funny situations where you'd, well, I think I'm here, and so you'd start going this way, and then you'd get to a ridge line, and you'd look around and say, "Well, wait a minute, you know, that doesn't add up, you know, we're not there at all, we're over here." So, you know, and that was before GPS, you know, so we were still people who knew how to use a compass and knew how to take sightings and read topography. Well, what I was, luckily my freshman year at Harvard, I rowed lightweight crew. And rowing crew is probably one of the most physically demanding things you can do in sports. One, you use your entire body, upper body, lower body. But the other thing you do is that you are part of an 8-man team and a coxswain, and you don't get to set your pace. You have to go at the pace the boat's going at. And so you learn that your limits are not your limits. That you can, in fact, go further. So when I showed up, you know, I was 6'2", probably weighed at the time maybe 160 pounds. I was a lightweight, so I had to be under 160. So I was in the 150 range, a skinny little kid. Uh, but because of having rode through the winter, I was in very good physical condition. So I didn't have any trouble with the obstacle course or those kinds of things. Um, and pack outs for me were a walk in the woods. Not because they were easy, but because I was in such a beautiful place and having such a, the fire's out. Good thing about most pack outs is that you'd finished your job. And so, now you're just going home. And those times when you didn't finish your job, you were on a project fire, and then you didn't have a pack out because by then they'd already established a base camp and they had other ways to get you out, either helicopter or by truck. But I had some long pack outs and just picking a pace, going at the pace, and like some of those lightning strike jumping smokes that hadn't been identified yet, figuring out where you were. And you get in some interesting discussion. I would say the vast majority of the fires I jumped on were two jumper fires. And so you'd have two people and he'd say, well, let's go that way. And I'd say, let's go that way. And, you'd have a discussion about it. It worked out. But it was we did, radios were only used on rare occasions. You almost never carried a radio. You'd use it like when I described when Duke was hurt and we needed to communicate with the plane. Chainsaws were very unusual. We had chainsaws. They were in big, huge boxes, and they had to be brought back. They were not disposable. The misery whip was a absolutely painful way to cut down a tree, but you could, put it in a circle and put it on your pack and carry it home, and it didn't weigh that much. We didn't have GPS. We didn't have modern rations, which to a large degree was a great boon because we probably ate a hell of a lot better than now. We would go through and the way they do it is you'd go into the commissary and you'd pick the things you wanted and you'd make an inventory of what you put in your bag. And then when you were dropped on that fire, the admin crew would take that inventory sheet and put it on the charge sheet and it got charged to the ranger district. So all the food was paid for by somebody else. And we had, paper sleeping bags, and you take your parachute and you put your parachute inside your paper sleeping bag, and you could get pretty warm at night. We all got to be really good seamstresses. Spent a lot of time in a sewing machine. Used to amaze some of my female friends by being able to tell them what a French fell seam was and how to operate a sewing machine.